try to pull up my screen, and we will go ahead and get started on our PowerPoint, and then kind of go from there too. I'm gonna minimize that, maximize that, and we'll go ahead and get started. So, you know, this is actually our last live teaching on As a Man Thinketh, and I mean, I don't know about you, but I've really enjoyed this. I think it's been great. Really has been. And so let's just real quick, last session on this one right here. And then we'll have our last chapter on Monday. We'll start into serenity. We talked about on serenity doing the writing the chapter out, right? Writing that chapter out every day and personalizing, man, it's super powerful. So let's just jump right on in here, and let's just have a quick look at some of this. Where are we? Yep, there we go. So real quick, there's so much in this whole book, but I really wanted to kind of look at go back to that thought and character, right? So thought and character are one. Thought and character are one. And kind of what comes to my mind is, why is thought and character one? Why is that? So when he says that, what does that actually mean when he says thought and character are one? You know, well, we said that thought seeds fall into the fertile field, that fertile soil of the subconscious mind. That's kind of what we've talked about there, that thought seeds fall into the fertile soil of the subconscious mind, and that sprouts into plants of belief is what we call it. And then those plants can only really produce the same kind of seeds, can't they? So the thoughts are responsible for the beliefs, and then the beliefs are really responsible for thoughts, and round and round and round and round it goes, right? In this self-perpetuating cycle. So that's thoughts and beliefs. So if you think about the plant is belief, then a lot of plants or a lot of beliefs in our character. So our character builds into this subconscious mind. And you remember how below the level of conscious awareness, all those beliefs sprout or give birth to seeds. So there we go. I don't know what's up with my computer there. There we go. Give birth to seeds. So seeds can only come from a plant, right? They can only give birth to themselves, can't they? So now, don't misunderstand this in that it means that we can't think anything, other than the thoughts that already come from those beliefs that we require. We can think anything we want. The point really is that we tend not to, right? That's our tendency. We tend to be these creatures of habit. We tend to be influenced by those beliefs because those beliefs control our perceptions, or really massively influence our perceptions anyway. And so we think that we're independently thinking because we think we're looking at and seeing independently, but really it's as a result of our conditioning. So what we need to do is learn to think and see independently. So the character, right? So this character in the subconscious gives rise to our thinking. And we're not necessarily aware of what it is that we believe most of the time. So how do we know what it is that we believe? How do we know what it is we believe? Well, he gives us the answer right there in the book, in the chapter on thought and circumstance, or thought and character. He says, character can only manifest and discover itself through environment and circumstance. That's good. So character can only manifest and discover itself through environment and circumstance. Great. What does that mean? What does that mean then? Well, if we go back to our stick man, and we have the character there in the subconscious mind, so his beliefs and the thinking that tend to come from that, and the beliefs drive behavior, right? We've talked about that, that our beliefs drive our behavior. So that conditioning really controls our behavior, and behavior gives us the results that we get in the world, and those results are a reflection of what's going on the inside, right? His outer conditions will always be harmoniously related to his inner state. That's what he says right there, right? Isn't that interesting, though? Isn't that interesting? See, now we don't necessarily know what's going on the inside sometimes. We have an idea, but we can see the results. We can see our results. And it's so if you want to see what someone believes, if you want to see a reflection of their character, then you can look for the results, can't you? Now, he always points out in here that there's a caveat that goes with this, right? He says, this doesn't mean that the man's circumstances are at any given time or an indication of his entire character. So this is not necessarily all that you are, right? But just as a part of you, maybe that needs working in this particular area, right? The just part of you needs to be worked, or an opportunity maybe for you to grow in this particular area. He says, those circumstances are so intimately connected with some vital thought element within himself that for the time being, they are indispensable for his development. I think that's really interesting. So we don't necessarily know what they are, and it might be just some teeny, real small aspect of us, as I've said, but he says they're indispensable to his development. What that means that we can't move forward unless we tackle these issues right here, right? The indispensable to his development. So we need to tackle or grow through these, or find a way around them, or deal with them somehow, deal with these circumstances in some way if we're going to move forward. Otherwise, we're not going to develop. We're not really going to grow. Back to my phrase, isn't that interesting, right? When you think about it, if you think of it, like that, circumstance really then becomes an opportunity, doesn't it? It becomes an opportunity, doesn't it? So here's the hidden character then, and by their fruits, you'll know them. Man, it's a good line, right? This is classic Jesus right here, isn't it? By their fruits, you'll know them. They may tell you they're a sheep, right? Folks tell you they're a sheep. They may look like a sheep, but are they really a sheep? Well, when you see what they do in the world, don't you? And so we can see, no matter what people say, it's what they do that really counts. And then what counts or what really comes from that, right? So by their fruits, you'll know them. Character can only manifest and discover itself through circumstance. And they'll know themselves. We'll know ourselves. Who's really in there? Because remember, all of this information is below the level of our conscious awareness, right? It's in that subconscious mind. So there's a lot in there, and we don't necessarily know what's going on in there. And there's this great quote that goes something like this: until you make the unconscious conscious, it will rule your life and you will call it fate. Man, that's good. I'm going to say it one more time. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will rule your life and you will call it fate. But see, when you dig into what's in there and make it conscious and then begin to change some of those things, that's when we can move forward, isn't it? So the wolf in sheep's clothing, maybe the truth is not always in the appearance of things, right? Character being one of those things that we can only discover through the outside world. In this last chapter that we did, I forget the exact quote he said, but he said something like, you can't travel within and stand still without, right? I think that's a powerful quote that goes right along with this. So circumstance gives us this opportunity to see what's in there, and also the opportunity to grow, the opportunity to change, right? Because the circumstances we face are the perfect curriculum for our growth, aren't they? If we realize that, if we reflect on that and realize that it gives us this opportunity. So he says, man is where he is, that he may learn, that he may grow. And I think that's what it's all about, right? It's all about growth, isn't it? We're here to grow, and we're here to grow, and that's not always convenient. It's not always comfortable, right? It's often frustrating. I don't know about you, but it's often frustrating. But we're here to grow. So those circumstances are actually what we need. They're actually what we need. Check this out. This is interesting. He says, as he learns the spiritual lessons, which any circumstance contains for him, then it passes away and gives place to other circumstances. But only as he learns that lesson, right? Only as he learns that lesson. So every circumstance, what he's saying is saying that any circumstance, there's an opportunity for a spiritual lesson. And if you learn it, then circumstances give way. But if you don't, if you don't, presumably they just kind of keep coming, don't they? Right? Which we don't outgrow, or then we don't outgrow our current circumstances. We just kind of keep experiencing the same thing over and over. But there's a lot in this simple chart right here that I've got right here. It really is. Just think about it, right? So that any circumstance contains a spiritual lesson. Any circumstance. So if we're here to grow and we're spiritual beings, we're gifted with an intellect, and we live in this physical body. So we live on this physical plane, the intellectual plane, and the spiritual plane, and we want to grow in all three of these. And he's saying that there's a spiritual lesson, there's a spiritual growth in our earthly pilgrimage, as James Arnold, I think he says, in our physical experiences is what he says. So there may be something that's very unpleasant on the physical level from which we learn a spiritual lesson, right? Isn't that interesting? So there may be failure, for example, on this physical level, and there might be great growth that comes from that, right? Imagine that you get hurt or you injure yourself here on this physical level. So you're experiencing some circumstance here on the physical level from maybe making bad decisions, right? Or poor choices. But what does good judgment come from? Good judgment actually comes from making bad choices, doesn't it? That's where you learn that. What does good judgment come from? Good judgment comes from bad decisions in the past. So bad decisions in the past may lead to these circumstances on the physical level. But we get good judgment actually on this right there, that intellectual level. And maybe we get the spiritual values of maybe resilience or persistence, or that just indomitable spirit, right, on the spiritual level. So something that looks bad and feels bad on this physical level could give us some great growth on these actual higher levels of who we are, right? And another one that I think is really thought-provoking and kind of uncomfortable to think about as well for most of us is, I think, on that model of the 7 levels of character, that top level is unconditional love, isn't it? The joyful soul. So love turns to unconditional love when we can forgive other people, right? So how to, you think about this, how do we learn forgiveness? How do you learn forgiveness without someone to forgive here on the physical level, right? You might need to be betrayed by someone you love on the physical level in order to tackle forgiveness on the intellectual level, to learn unconditional love on the spiritual level. Just think about that, right? Just think about that. He says we learn through every step of our earthly pilgrimage. But who wants to be betrayed by people they love, right? Or really be betrayed by anyone? But when you begin to think of it in these terms, in this way, there's things we can go through that are for our ultimate good, right? It's fascinating, isn't it? The Bible says all things work together. All things work together for the good of those who love him, right? The other thing I think that's worth pointing out on this diagram as well is that he says, as learns the spiritual lessons which any circumstance contain for him. So these are his circumstance, and they're our circumstances. What we're facing are our circumstances. We might be going through the same exact circumstances with other people, and they might get totally different spiritual lessons. They might get totally different intellectual growth, or none at all, because it's personal, isn't it? You think there's some kind of cohesion between us both being in these same circumstances and conditions at the same exact time. That's the the beautiful and the wonderful orchestration of all things, right? But the lesson we learn, those lessons, they're our own, right? It's an us and us game. It's a me and me deal, right? It's a you and you deal, isn't it? And I just think this is good stuff. I don't know about you guys, but I just think this stuff is just so good, so good. So just to finish this one right here off, he says both pleasant and unpleasant external conditions are factors which make for the ultimate good of the individual. Man, that is I think about that. That is just such a powerful, powerful statement. So I hope this video has added value to you guys. For those that are watching it, watching the recording, and Scott, who's here with me, and anyone else that jumps back in later, I hope it has added value to you. And Scott, any takeaways, any thoughts that jump out at you from that little lesson there?
See if I can find the mute button here.
Oh, there you go. You're good.
Yeah. I'm still just amazed at how much we don't truly understand the way our thoughts direct our direction in life, or that we're not even really taught this, like even in a school setting or a school level. I think that's probably been the biggest lesson to me, is that we don't understand thought. We don't understand thought at all, and we don't teach it.
Yeah. It's crazy, right? I mean, and think about how powerful it is. As I was reading through the book, and one of the, statements that we kind of made right there is our perceptions, right?
Mm-hmm.
I was talking about betrayal. Nobody wants to be betrayed. I don't.
No.
But if we perceive the lesson within that, man, there is great growth from that, right? I heard a guy talking yesterday. He said he used to own all these, at this time, I think he had about 3 or 4 like mechanic shops, and I think he ended up having more than that. But at this one point, he had 3 or 4, and he didn't know it at the time, but the guy, his manager, was opening up a shop right next door to him, had called all of his clients, and had gotten all of his clients. And he didn't know about it until the owner of the actual shop he was renting from called him and said, "Hey, can you give a reference for this particular guy?" And he's like, "Yeah, but what's the reference for?" He said, "Well, I mean, he's trying to rent from me, and he's going to open up his own mechanic shop, and he put you down as a reference." And he said, "Okay." And I mean, he was mad. He said he paced like 3 days praying into what God would have him to do. And God said, "I want you to bless him." And he said, "No, I don't want to bless him. I don't want to bless him." And he started praying into it. And God told him, "How about you just give him everything? Give him everything at your shop. Give him all the equipment. Just give him all the equipment." He's like, "No, that makes no sense." That makes no sense. And he told his wife what he felt like God was saying to him. And, she was like, "No, that doesn't make no sense." But they both started praying about it, and was like, "You know what? I think that is what we should do." So they loaded up all the equipment, took a U-Haul to his opening day. And he came outside, and the guy's like, "Hey man, I'm sorry, man. Look, I was going to tell you, don't be mad, or, whatever, and it's like, "Hey, no, I want to give you something." And he opened it up, gave him all of his equipment. They just shut down that entire one. And he said ever since then, God has, there were times where they didn't have much, and people would come and just bless them financially or whatever. Yeah. He said, "You remember that time you blessed this other guy? I'm blessing you with this." And now they're super financially well off. But and that's not the point. That's not the point. So you can get financial gain, but you understand what I'm saying is, he was obedient and obeyed that. And anyway, so yeah.
That's a heck of a lesson I have to try to learn.
Yeah,
and especially right? in that manner. I mean, yeah, I don't know that I could. It
doesn't make a lot of sense.
That would be hard. That would be very hard.
Yeah.
That would be very hard.
Well, Scott, any questions of anything that we talked about in that? I don't want to take your time up any more than I have to, but if you have questions, I would love to dig in, or any thoughts or anything, man.
I mean, I think I've been meditating quite a bit, on that chart. Yeah. And how I feel like I still kind of get caught between level 4 and level 5, as much as I'm trying to stay 5 or better, 5 or above, that's been the goal. I can see myself getting sucked back under that line of courage there, and for me, I think I've been just trying to figure out how to stay above it. How do we, in the daily struggles and the daily trials and stuff, how do you stay above level 4? How do you stay in 5? Is it just a time thing, like we've talked about? You know, don't hate the process. You know, things just come with time. I guess I'm just trying to find a way to expedite that process, because I feel like once I break through that rapid growth comes from kind of hitting that level.
Yeah, so I think it is a time thing, but I think first step, you're doing great, is awareness, right?
Yeah.
Is awareness. Think about if you did not do this study,
yeah,
where you may be, right? But I think being in awareness with that, and then if you're at 4 and 5 and you're wanting to get to 7, what's the difference, right? Like what if doing what you're doing, meditating, what's different? What's the difference between me at a level 7 and where I'm at right now? What needs to go? What needs to get rid of? What do I need to add to, right? So
yeah.
I think you're doing a great job of awareness, but I think it's the process. To me, the process is being in continual awareness, you know, and catching it in the moment.
Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah,
that being in the moment. And for me, I'll be honest with you, for me, it's anger. Being able to control my anger in the moment.
This next chapter we're about to do,
Yeah,
it's gonna be good for you, Scott. I hope you'll do the 5 days of writing it out. I promise. It made I didn't think, to me, when I did it the first time, I didn't know the impact it would have, because there are moments now I could get, you know, frustrated. Anger or something probably I struggle with at times too, right? But there are quotes that I remember writing down from this chapter that just popped in my mind, and it just reminds me of it. You know, calmness of mind is a beautiful jewel of wisdom, you know, and that just, boom. Calmness of mind is a beautiful jewel of wisdom, you know? So it's peace, be still, you know? And anyway, I think this is going to be a great chapter for you, I think. So serenity, great chapter. Yeah.
Well, good. Got something to look forward to.
Yes, sir. Well, Scott, man, hey, buddy, I appreciate you joining me today. And
Absolutely.
As you know, man, you do, but text me, call me with anything, right? Group too.
Mm-hmm.
So, anyway.
Absolutely. Cory, I appreciate you and everything you do for us too, man.
Yes, sir, buddy. Well, you have a great day. Maybe you get you a good workout in.
I was halfway through it.
Oh, hey, go back now.
Yeah. I'll see you soon.